yesterday.
I know, I was listening.
Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. StreamYard has not crashed. I'm Paul John Dykes. Today I'm joined by John Paul Mason. It's always a pleasure. And before we get stuck right in about everything Celtic, everything relating to that tagline and all the news stories that are surrounding the club at the moment, see that jersey over your shoulder there, JP? We just had a very interesting chat before going live about how, you're always picked up when you get it wrong. You're always called out when you get something wrong. But there's numerous occasions where, if you think about it, you get it right, but you didn't ever go back and recall it because you're moving on to the next subject. I remember when that jersey over your shoulder there was released, and I loved it straight off the bat. I absolutely loved it. A lot of people didn't, but I think now that we've seen it in use on the players in match action, a lot more folk are loving that away jersey. Classic away kit.
Well, even better when you're seeing the team winning it at places like Rugby Park on Sunday. So, yeah. Yep. No, I'm into it. I've still not picked up the third one, which I hope to get if they do release another batch without the sponsor. I'm just not a sponsor fan, as you know. But, yeah, I like that a lot. It's just it was nice to see it getting aired on Sunday because you don't really see away kits that often. Like, if you go back through the last 10, 20 years, tell me the amount of times Celtic have actually worn away kits, because it just seems to be perennially the hoops, which is fine, but it kind of defeats the purpose of the away kit. Like, when we can wear the away kit that doesn't clash, like, what is that clashing with in terms of home tops if you go to play away at Tannadice or something like that, or Easter Road? I mean, you'd have to wear it at Easter Road because that's the only the strips that clash. But no, I like it, and I think I liked it. I think I liked it straight away. I can't remember if when I saw the perennial leaked pictures of all the strips that seems to happen every year. Still a complete confusion as to how that happens. But then if strips are being leaked, if team sheets are being leaked, then it's probably a little surprised that shirts are being leaked as well.
Anything is possible, you're right. The thing with jerseys is I think that there needs to be use for the jersey. It can't just be a fashion accessory, because if it is, then make it a polo shirt or a jersey or a sweater and sell it in the shop. If it's an official Celtic jersey, there needs to be a use for it. We need to use it throughout the season. And it was great at the weekend to see that one aired in a victory, which probably wasn't a fashionable swashbuckling victory, JP, but a victory nonetheless. What do you make? You've not had a chance to talk about it on here. What did you make of the weekend's performance? It was gritty. We got through it. We got the win.
I think we had to fight for everything on Sunday. I mean, that was a determined Kilmarnock team who, but for the width of a post, could have taken the lead against us. You're always a bit on edge going there because I've been there plenty of times and seen us lose. Going way back to the stop in the 10 season and the season before that as well, Rugby Park was always like this absolute title burial ground for us. Mentioned them before, but the names Burke and Bagan still haunt me to this day because they put us to the sword in the season that Rangers won 9 in a row. Which is why that away win at Rugby Park in 97-98, midweek, 2-1, I think Simon Donnelly scored. It was basically and it was at that time where it was like every game was must win. And you knew that after that day, winning at Rugby Park, that night even, was a huge deal. So whilst it's still very early in the season, the thing I said to my mate as we were coming out of the ground, I was like, well, we've just won here and they didn't. So tick that off as a double victory, really, because we proved we can go and, work on a pitch that's really not suitable for this league, as we all know. Mm-hmm. And also, just sort of have the ugly side of the game. And as Brendan Rodgers pointed out, 3 different competitions, 3 victories, all different types of games off the back of the European result. So I was really happy just to get the win. I mean, obviously you want to see swashbuckling football, but the second goal from Kuhn just again showed his rise and being that guy that can get you that goal, the guy that you lean on players like that to get you goals in moments where you need them. And 1-0 was a pretty precarious lead in that game until we got the second and put some distance between us, because you're only like a dodgy VAR decision away from maybe a penalty or something like that, or a red card. My personal opinion is that was never. I could tell from where I was, and I know we were at the other end of the ground, but just the way that his shape of his body was as he went in to make the tackle, I was like, that's not a red card. And the guy was at it, because there's no way, when you watch that back, there's no way that the way the guy reacted to it and the rolling around and all that, it's like, you're not hurt, mate. You've felt contact and you're absolutely hamming it up to try and get our player sent off, because he's not gone. He's gone. It's not been a full follow through on the leg, and then you look back at the Ida incident and you're like, wait a minute, how's that not been identified? He was down for ages and we were like, what's going on here? And Kyogo's warming up below us, and then the next thing he's okay. But then I watched it back and I'm like, that's a deliberate elbow. Has anyone even looked at that or spoken about it on these review shows? I saw the Dermot Gallagher clip where he was talking about the Casper Schmeichel elbow and attempt on him, and I think two out of the three of that panel were like, that's a red card. He's intended to hurt him. Might have missed, but he's intended to hurt him. And I said at the time, I was like, whatever's happened there, Schmeichel's not going to be like that for no reason, because he was absolutely raging at him.
Is that the first time we've seen him reacting like that in a Celtic jersey?
Pretty much,
probably.
Yeah. And he seems to be quite a cool, calm, collected customer, nice guy.
Very focused.
Always sort of smiling and everything else. And he obviously knew something had happened, but it was that quick. You were not going to see it with the naked eye, but when you see it with the slowed down replay, and virtually everybody's basically said that the Hatate red card was not a red card, except for Chris Boyd. He's the only one still banging. He's like Kenny Miller at that point. Remember, he's dying on the hill with Kenny Miller for his.
I know. It becomes pantomime, because everybody knows the pundit will have an allegiance, right? So we know that McFadden, for example, is a Celtic fan, comes from a Celtic supporting family, but he's balanced, JP. He's balanced, and that's the thing, right? Chris Sutton will have a dig at Celtic. Absolutely. He's had some massive digs at Celtic down the years. But Boyd, it's almost just like getting a fan from a supporters bus or from the stand to give you a view. And I know that some people have embraced fan media within the mainstream. Others still look down their nose at fan media. I've had more balanced views on fan media than I have from Chris Boyd. Now, the instances that you mentioned, and I think there was three big talking points with regards to red cards. The first one, if Hatate doesn't draw himself out of that, and so that his leg is actually, there's no power at all going to connect between his foot and the player's leg, then it could have been a sore one, but he did. And if Schmeichel doesn't draw out of that, because you notice he actually draws his head away, he's getting an elbow right to the side of the face. I mentioned at the time, I couldn't remember who it was against, but I've since found out that it was Hatate. Donnelly has been sleek it against Celtic before. It was actually last season. And I read a report during the week there that it was Hatate that was on the wrong end of it. So he's got previous for that as well. And that was just dirty. And you're right about Ida. That was dirty. And then the Kilmarnock player, who isn't actually badly fouled by Hatate, makes out like he is. Yet, Derek McInnes overlooks all that. He's this kind of guy at the end of every game who will find something negative about Celtic, no matter what it is. And I would say to him, look at your own players, because they're hammer throwers. They're absolute hammer throwers. And there's been other teams who have been guilty of that in the past, JP, on that pitch, which is always going to be a talking point until they get rid of it. John Hughes referred to it as a failed hair transplant yesterday. Can't disagree with that.
Oh, by the way, congratulations to John on his successful achievement of 55.
Well done, John. Happy birthday, big man. You're right. He made it. He made it. Others don't, but he made it.
They're all his. They're all his. All 55 years are his.
Everyone. Yeah, and his name, absolutely. He's not been reincorporated or taken over by a different company.
It's John Hughes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I love that. But it seems as though at this moment in time, JP, you can set your watch by it. Every time we play Kilmarnock at Rugby Park, there's 3 things that are going to be sure as hell will happen. The first one is McInnes will moan after the game. He'll find something to moan about Celtic, and he will moan after the game. The second one is the pitch is a disaster and will be spoken about in the empty seats, JP. What a spectacle for Scottish football. Dreadful. Faded blue seats. And you're thinking, as a business in any industry, that's madness. I don't get it.
Yeah, no, I know. And we'll have more of the same on a week on Saturday, because my old supporters club on their Facebook page, I still, keep up to date with what's going on there. And Nick Wood, the man in charge of tickets for the Heriot Watt and Edinburgh University Celtic Supporters Club, put up a post saying for the first time in 30 years, or no, 40 years, they haven't had a ticket for Tynecastle. So basically
40
everyone.
years. Wow.
Well, yeah, they're 40 years this year. 1984 was when they were founded. So, first time ever. And I think he then replied, somebody like jokingly put, "Resign." It was an old joke to be bandied about on the supporters bus on the way through the games. If anything bad happened, there would just be shouts of "resign," no matter how small it was. But I think he then replied saying that the actual official allocation was either 576 or 546 tickets for Celtic, and that to me is just absolutely astonishing. Like, I cannot believe that is their allocation for a Premier League game on a Saturday night at Tynecastle.
What they're creating, though, what they're now creating, JP, is, and I'm not even going to call it a narrative, it's a feeling that I have as a Celtic supporter, right? These clubs that are doing this don't want us in their stadiums.
Yeah.
The clubs that do it, because I have yet to see the business plan. I know that St Mirren have come out with facts and figures, etc., to suggest that their supporters don't buy tickets to see their team playing Celtic or Rangers. So they would rather, they would rather not be at the game. They would rather an empty seat at the game than see a Celtic fan or a Rangers fan on that seat, which I think is absurd. Scottish football is not awash with cash. We're not great at doing broadcast deals or sponsorship deals. We don't have a lot of money as a Scottish game, yet we're continually turning away Celtic fans. I don't care about the other fans, Celtic fans. So what I'm thinking now, JP, is it's a personal thing. I'm taking it almost personally. It's like, we don't want Celtic supporters in our stadium. Now, that echoes some of the language used by Derek McInnes after the game, where, Celtic decide, this is our minute silence, this is our stadium. And that's the feeling I'm now getting. It's, if it wasn't for, and this isn't triumphalism or elitism, if it wasn't for the money Celtic do generate for the Scottish game, it'd be a hell of a lot worse for these clubs, JP. A hell of a lot worse. So why not embrace the fact that you do have a big club in your league? Nobody can deny it. You do have a world-renowned club, a global brand in your league. Embrace it. Why?
With a huge waiting list to actually get a season ticket at the home stadium, which houses 60,000 people.
Yep.
I mean, I read that article. I think it was Celts Are Here maybe wrote an article about the reality of the waiting list situation at Celtic Park. Our renewal rate is one of the highest in Europe. Like,
what is it, 2% or something don't renew? Something like that. Like 1,000 people don't renew.
So you are effectively waiting on, and it sounds a bit morbid to say it, but you are effectively waiting on people passing away. But even then, when people pass away, it's likely that will then go, somebody within their family will take it on or whatever. It's the chances of you getting a season ticket now are so slim again, which then brings the argument in about potentially redeveloping the main stand.
That interested me, because I know that there was an article written, was it in the Daily Mail? Maybe. I'm not sure what mainstream publication actually looked into it, because I remember the figure that had been provided to a fans forum. Within the last 5 years, the figure given was 70 million, right? Now, the figure I'm now reading is 80 million. So the first thing that springs to mind, JP, is get it done before it becomes 100 million, because it's going up. There's only one trajectory, and it's going upwards.
And don't go to China for your metals.
Don't use a certain supplier that a governing club used. But also, the big issue that they're talking about is how to rehouse 8,000 Celtic fans who are currently my season tickets in the main stand. That's where my season ticket is. How do you rehouse?
Few cries of, but you're never there. You're never there.
Hello.
Unfortunately, you have a business to run.
The big thing as well with that, JP, is I have tried various different avenues of how to actually have a live match day show, which we only set up when nobody was allowed at the house, right? So it's not like it was a tactical or strategic thing. We did it because we reacted to the global issues at the time, but people watch it all over the world. It is our most popular show, live stream, that is. So I've asked the club, broadcasting rules don't allow you to broadcast in the stadium or around the stadium. So we can't do that, right? I mean, they don't always police that well, because people do fire up clips and all the rest of it, but apparently you're not allowed to do it, and we're trying to keep on the right side of that. We thought about getting a Volkswagen and doing a proper pimp my ride and turn it into like a wee studio in the back. I've not written that idea off, right? Whereby we can do that, jump out the van, go to the game, and etc. But probably the most realistic way I can do it is by finding a space, maybe up at the venue that we use for this is Acsom, where we can have a nice wee room. We do this, a bolt 5 minutes before, 10 minutes before kickoff, and we do it like that. And one of the boys that are maybe living overseas can do the buttons, So there might be a way around it. It's taking me a wee while, but I'll never ever give up my season ticket. I'll never give that up. That's something that
if they were to redevelop it, you would need to be somewhere else in the ground.
But how do they do that? That's the thing. I can't think of how they could do that. I mean, in terms of away allocation, right? So there's a rule where you need to have, what is the percentage? If they actually set a percent, or do they just call it a reasonable amount of tickets have to be offered to the away team?
I can't imagine or recall seeing a percentage figure written down anywhere. 15 jumps to mind, but it can't be that. There's no way it's 15.
Because the point I'm making is there are obviously seats that are never really taken up unless you're playing against Rangers, when they were allowed to get tickets for the games. So you could fill some of those seats, etc. But there would be people who wouldn't be able to attend games if indeed the reconstruction work fell into a new season. So throughout the summer and into a new season, would you need to play a couple of games elsewhere? We've done that before. Obviously, we've done a whole season at Hampden, and we played some games at Murrayfield. So would that be the option, to play half a dozen games somewhere else? I don't know. But I think as a football club, we need to seriously look at it, JP. Not only just to fill the season ticket thirst and appetite that's out there, but also something you and I have spoken about at this moment in time. We can't use the stadium for concerts, for live music events. I mean, whatever they built the time that Celtic Park was used for the grand opening would have been a stage that you wouldn't have expected for a massive rock concert, for Oasis, for example. So, I mean, the entrances and the exits could be looked at that stage. And the stadium, in terms of an atmosphere, JP, would be better if it was more of a bowl rather than, three sides consistent and then the drop down for the main stand. It's a stand that was built in 71. There was a redevelopment in 88, but it's old-fashioned. It needs upgraded. As a football club, we need to do it. And you imagine Celtic having a Champions League final. I mean, these are the kinds of things you could then look at as well, JP.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it would be really interesting to be a fly in the wall in a meeting, at a meeting at Celtic Park to hear what the chat of this has been, because there's no way that it's not been spoken about. There's no way that there hasn't been probably seriously high-level meetings to the point where there's been a budget drawn up for it, and it's properly been discussed to the point that if we wanted to do this, we could pull the trigger on it tomorrow and start the process. I wonder what the feasibility of it all is. Like, is it as straightforward as you and I maybe hope and think it is, or is there bigger issues, structural issues that make it? I mean, are you talking about absolutely tearing it down? I mean, you maybe need to tear it down and start again. And how do you keep the front of it all? I don't know. It's an interesting conundrum, but one that is now starting to be more of a realistic prospect because of the, like I said, because of when you read that sort of level of demand. I mean, it would be foolish not to consider it. And then you look at like Borussia Dortmund Stadium, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were definitely intimidated by that stadium. I don't doubt it. I mean, when it gets to 3 and that crowd are fully going for it. I mean, I wasn't there, so I can't say personally what that must have been like. But I mean, God help a team that we give a going over to at Celtic Park if that whole ground is a bowl, like you say, because it would be something else, like a Champions League night in there with it all the way around would be wild. I hope I get to see that in my lifetime if that does become a thing, you know.
I've always said this, and it's with regret that I say it. I think that whilst we're in Scottish football, the board will not finance that type of reconstruction. Only if this Champions League that we're in just now is a prelude to some kind of European league.
Because it feels like it is. See, the more that you're actually looking at it, and then I was just looking ahead to January and thinking about what I'm going to do in January, and then you're like, whoa, we've got Champions League games in January. That's absolutely mad. Like, that's the first time that's ever happened, and people laughing at the back. Of course, yes, we've not been in Champions League football after Christmas for a very long time, but we're there by necessity because of the structure of the competition. So, but it does feel just this format, the fact that it's this giant league, it's given more opportunity to play more clubs, more different. Like we faced Atalanta for the first time ever. We faced Borussia Dortmund for the first time in 32 years. We've never played Aston Villa, as far as I know, in European competition. Do you know otherwise? Have we?
No.
Well, there you go. So like all these are all firsts, and that
there's a freshness, JP, to that, isn't there?
There is a freshness, and it's kind of like that will increase the thirst and the appetite for the competition going forward, because everybody wants something new. Nobody wants 3 games against Paris Saint-Germain, Bayern Munich and Barcelona and seeing a goal difference like -25 and 1-4 or whatever, because that's not enjoyable. The experience of going to these places is enjoyable, of course, but when you're going and you've got no hope of qualifying, no hope of progression, but right now we're in such a great position with 2 further home games to come, and not a horrendous away situation, that we're actually going, well, wait a minute, we could. There's one of 3 ways that we could progress here.
Mm-hmm.
That's not been open to us at all in the past.
No. The word I always go back to is that it's completely refreshed the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that, the teams that I'm going to refer to in a moment were all there on merit, but you were seeing the same teams year in, year out, and it was becoming a bit stale. For me, it was becoming stale, JP, and if Celtic aren't playing in the tournament, I don't bother watching it. Personally, I know that a lot of people like the big games and they'll tune in even when Celtic leave the competition. I don't. I'm concentrating on whatever team are playing in green and white. Now, there's loads of people talking about the main stand. It's one of the subjects that always gets the juices flowing. So we'll be bringing up the comments. We also want to talk about Kasper Schmeichel and how he became Celtic signing of the summer, and someone who might have even called it on Acsom as well. Coming back from the international break, we need to look at the season that Kuhn is having. And then the flip side of that, the season that Lewis Palmer is not having, because he was probably the winger this time last year that we were excited about. And look how quickly that's changed as well. Let's get some of the comments coming in. The other thing I want to talk about, we mentioned before, JP, and I've seen quite a few of the blogs picking up on this, not because of us, but since we spoke about it, Daniel Cummings not yet offered a new deal at Celtic, scoring goals for fun, 20 and 18. And why is the big question. 18 years of age, why are we not getting the deal done early? But on the flip side of that as well, looking at some of the young players who might have been what you thought were next in line to break into the first team over the last few years. and what happened to them. So earlier on, and I'll bring the comments up before we get stuck into this. I just want people's thoughts on this. I had a wee look at some of the guys. This isn't an extensive, comprehensive list, but here's some of the players that we thought were maybe going to be coming into the first team squad, but left before, we were able to see them really cement a place in the Celtic side. So Leo Hjeld, you'll remember Big Yogi describing him as Van Dijk-esque, and he eventually left us for Leeds United in 2021. He's now 21, playing in the Championship at Sunderland. He has played 4 games this season, so he's not a regular, JP. Championship, Sunderland. Conor McBride, he's 23 years of age. You might remember that he left Celtic for Blackburn as a youngster. And listen, here you go. Here's a cautionary tale. He is now playing 5th tier of English football with Rochdale, with 17 appearances to his name. Barry Hepburn. This is what kind of sparked it earlier on, as well as the Daniel Cummins conversation. Barry Hepburn, the kid who left Celtic for Bayern Munich, who is now 20 years of age, is unattached. He has no club. He was freed from Bayern Munich. He has no club. Prior to being freed, he had been on some loan deals and played 32 appearances for Queen's Park and in Austria as well. Liam Morrison, the other kid that went to Bayern Munich, is now also playing in the Championship for Queen's Park Rangers. He's 21 now. He's only made 3 appearances. So a bit like Hjeld, he's part of a squad, JP. He's not getting a game. Ben Doak, 19, obviously, famously, he left for Liverpool. He's now on loan at Middlesbrough. He is playing. He's had 10 appearances in the Championship, only scored 1 goal. Liam Hughes also went to Liverpool. He was a goalie. And he is now 23, never made it at Liverpool, now playing his football in Iceland. And he has made... There's a trend here, isn't there? Nobody's actually smashing it, is the trend. The next one is Karamoko Dembele. You might have heard of him. He's been in the game for about 10 years and he's only 21. He obviously left for Brest, who I think are the dark horses of the European competition this season. Now at QPR, alongside Liam Morrison in the Championship, but he is playing regularly for them. Vincent Angelini, remember the goalkeeper, Angelini? Now he came through...
Is his father-in-law not Davy Hay?
His granddad.
Granddad, all right.
Granddad, Davy, yep. So Davy Hay's his granddad. Angelini left for Watford. He's now 21. He was a teammate coming through the ranks of Karamoko, and he is now playing his football in Saudi Arabia, and he's never kicked a ball. So he signed for Al Riyadh, and he's never played. Cameron Harper, remember him in the dark old days of COVID? Remember, So he is 22. He's one of the success stories, believe it or not. So he went to New York, and he plays every week. And he's scoring and he's getting assists and all the rest of it. So he's doing well. Rocco Vata, 19 years of age, signed for Championship side Watford. He has played 117 minutes of football this season. Armstrong Okoflex, 22, left for West Ham, now playing in Switzerland, 13 games, so he is playing. Boston Lawal, 21, went to Stoke in the Championship, hasn't kicked the ball. Daniel Kelly, 19, went to Millwall in the Championship. He's played 3 games. So you look at that, right? And there's 13 players there. Of the 13, you could probably say 5 of them are playing regular football. The highest league is probably English Championship level. And in terms of Celtic, out of the 13 players, they've made 28 appearances for Celtic. The most appearances being made was Karamoko Dembele with 10. So I'm looking at Cummings, and I'm asking myself, are we... By the way, I think he's a top player, top talent, really good prospect. But we're clearly not producing enough quality there, JP, because there's the 13 next, big things. Not one of them's kicked on. Ben Doak, I'm not writing him off. But, I mean, there you go. They're not playing. Some of them are unattached.
Well, I think I said this last week, that as much as Brendan Rodgers is concentrating on the here and now, and absolutely he should, because that's his ultimate remit, I don't think there's any way that he's not looking at the bigger picture in terms of the academy and creating a pathway for guys that have got the potential, because they're never going to be the finished article, are they? They're not at 17, 18. It's not as if they're going to be like, ready-made first-team players. But, I mean, you look at what he's done with Nicholas Kuhn. If Brendan Rodgers can develop a young player that's come through the ranks at Celtic at 17, 18 and get him to a level that allows him to play regular football for Celtic, then that's a massive success. And I'm sure that would be on his list of priorities to do. On Cummings is, I'm pretty sure, I'm going to get confused about this, but I'm pretty sure it's my mate's dad's pal's son. I know that sounds really tenuous, but from that I heard that the guy's really screwed. He's got the head screwed on. Isn't he flash? Isn't he, posting about what he does in training on social media or anything like that? He's a Celtic supporter and wants to stay at Celtic. So you'd like to think that if there's a willingness on both sides that, could we be talking about him in 2-3 years' time scoring goals for Celtic in the first team? I mean, I'd love to think that. It would be amazing, because you need that kind of, that freak of nature, that one in 1,000 probably players, maybe more than that, like a Callum McGregor to come through. And then when you're reading out the stats at Callum McGregor's trophy haul and James Forrest's trophy haul, you want there to be a continuation of Scottish players who can find their way onto that list. And right now that looks like a very, very far away prospect for a player. I mean, the idea of a Scottish Celtic player getting anywhere near those level of trophies seems to be very unrealistic. There's no one knocking on that door.
At the moment, JP, I'd say they're the last of a dying breed. As we sit here,
it's really sad. It's great, obviously, that we've lived through that time and we've watched them be so successful for Celtic, because ultimately them being successful has led to the team and the club being successful, and us as fans are able to celebrate that. But yeah, you want a continuation of that. You want that to be the norm at Celtic, that there is always 2 or 3 coming through that make a stamp. And fair enough if they do something like Kieran Tierney and give us 2 seasons of, 2 or 3 seasons of playing week in, week out at the highest level and winning trophies, and then they decide that they want another challenge. That's fine. You're not expecting them all to do a James Forrest and Callum McGregor. They, like you say, are kind of outliers, but we're not even getting that. We're not even getting that 2 seasons out of someone and then they go on to sign for Arsenal or whoever. We're not even got that. So that's probably has to be the aim, and hopefully that is the aim of everyone within the club to get to that.
We do talk about it a hell of a lot, JP, and I don't know if it's because we probably come from a generation where the youth development was a massive part of what Celtic actually represented, because you looked at the team and there was that hardcore, like the Centenary boys. We were doing a night in December with Peter Grant, Roy Aitken and Pat Bonner. Those 3 guys made over 1,500 appearances between them. That's just absolutely off the scale. That's bonkers. And, I know that Bonner came over from Keju Rovers in 1978 as a young guy and all the rest of it, but basically he was put into the Celtic system at that point. People might argue, he wasn't a youth product. There's certain players that come in at a certain point and they're put into our system, and I think you can class them as a graduate from that system once they break in to the first team, and Bonner was one of those types of players, but it's no longer the norm, like you say. And the saddest thing at the moment, unless something changes, the likes of Forrest and McGregor are the last of a dying breed. Now, I don't think it's about Celtic supporters hounding certain players that come through, a la Mikey Johnson, because I've heard that being levied our way as well. I don't think it's that. I think it's just about every season, if you've got a youth development programme that's costing £2.5 million at the last check every year to run, then you would hope that you would get 2 or 3 graduates every single season. Those 2 or 3 graduates may not make it in the first team, JP, but they need to be part of the first team programme and they need to be part of these squads. And it was great to see Francis Turley breaking through over the pre-season and into a couple of the match day squads this season. And I'm hoping that Daniel Cummins is going to be the next in line. But yes, it's great that behind the scenes we are looking at things like Pathway. We've created a role of a Pathway manager. Tisdale, I'm sure, is working on numerous different implementations within the football department. But that list, when I looked at it, JP, I thought to myself, wow, these guys were all the next big thing. You hear John Hughes saying Held was the next Van Dijk, Ben Dokes the next Kenny Dalglish, Rocco Vata. These guys were all golden boys of the Celtic Academy.
I try my best not to come out with hyperbole like that about players, because you know that definitely does come back to bite you if you start talking in those terms.
Let's think about a few of them then. Remember, Brian McLaughlin came in, and not everybody, but he was being described as the next Jimmy Johnson. And then you had Simon Donnelly. He was Dalglish, wasn't he? He was the next Dalglish. So yeah. I don't think it bodes well if you start doing that.
No, it doesn't. Just when you're talking about how people have fared since leaving Celtic, I was reading an article this morning about Bojan Miovski. He's not doing very well at Girona. Seven appearances, 0 goals, 0 assists. I think maybe even 0 shots as well, which is quite worrying for a striker. So it's interesting to see. You know, Serie A is obviously a tough league, and you can't obviously make a judgment. He might turn it around and end up having a good season, but I mean that's 7 million they've shelled out for him, I think. And we know he's a good player. There's no doubt about it, but it just shows you that sometimes big money moves don't always work out, as we've been witness to quite a few times in recent years.
Yeah, that will probably lead us on to a discussion about Adam Ida, who's getting it tight, I think it's safe to say, in some quarters, JP. Some really good points coming through on the stadium. Let's bring some of the comments up. By the way, if you were watching live yesterday, apologies again. StreamYard went kaput, some kind of global outage. So I don't even know what that is. But what it meant is that John, myself, and James were chucked out for 15 minutes, JP. And it was a similar kind of viewership as we've got there now. There's about 1,100 watching us at the moment, right? 11 or 1,200. And by the time StreamYard came back up 15 minutes later, there was still like 500-600 Acsom viewers kicking about, talking to each other in the comments, going, "Where are these guys?" You know,
they knew that you would be determined enough to rectify it and come back. You knew that I mean, that's probably testament to yourself as a person, that they would have faith that you would just be like, "Oh well, we'll just leave it for the day."
Exactly. You know? I was coming on, and we were finishing that hour, and that was it. It was unfortunate though. You remember back in the day where, like, if there was some unexpected thing happened on the telly, and they would have like a frame. Remember the frame, and it was the wee girl with the wee teddy and all that.
Aye.
You remember that? We didn't even have that. We should have. We should have had a Celtic one of them with Hoopy, but we didn't even have that. We didn't have access.
You should have had the sticker that I saw last night on Twitter. I'm still not calling it X. I genuinely don't know how long I'm going to last on there. By the way, there's people dropping like flies on that.
I noticed that actually yesterday, just even with my followers who have obviously ditched it and gone on to this new platform.
Yeah, I think that's who knows, but
bring back Bebo.
Hi, the Shamrock, or MySpace, even better.
Yeah.
The Shamrock, Paul McQuaid shared he's doing these stickers. You were talking about it yesterday.
Yes, I've got one of his books here, JP. You'll like it because it's very visual.
Well, he shared a picture of a cartoonized version of Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Oh yes,
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and it had the ultras. Like Johnny Depp was like the ultras face, and I just replied going, "This needs to be a T-shirt. If you can get a T-shirt with that, I'm 100% getting it."
See, when you flick through this, right, it's like if you came up with an idea of a Celtic book and you think, would that work? Celtic stickers, and somehow it works. And the reason it works, right, is because there's so many creative minds in the Celtic fan base, be it from the ultra movement to just people in their rooms designing stickers. My personal favourite double spread is this one, JP, for obvious reasons. It's got the old musical theme, Stone Roses, Bob Marley, all that kind of stuff. I want to be Edward. Brilliant. Check it out, and check out everything that the Shamrock guys do, because they've got like a fairly regular fanzine style magazine. Every edition is a must-have, JP. Every single one. You will learn something new from it. This is a big thing. And then regularly they'll release books as well. So yeah, thanks for sticking with us. Absolutely brilliant. Acsom, the Urban Culture. Acsom need to get a box sorted out for next season. Well, let me tell you, right? For someone who couldn't get a ticket for the Aberdeen game, what I had to pay for it I'll tell you something, Acsom couldn't afford those kind of prices when it comes to a box or corporate. We could not simply afford that. McLaughlin P, the issue was London Road Nursery School, Parkhead Boy. They're talking about previous maybe attempts or plans for reconstruction. But obviously the nursery school is gone and it's now been replaced by a car park. Beautiful school that was as well. But obviously it took a long, long time before they could demolish it.
Well, was it not listed? Surely it must have been listed.
Well, see the thing, right? Have you noticed that on the actual drive up, if you're coming from the Fife end, right, it's on the right-hand side, and then you take your wee right in to get into the car park at the superstore. And they've kept the original wall around the front of the school. They've kept that wall. And you've even got the boys' entrance. Because they've missed a trick. They should have changed it to BHOYS. It's still there. That, you know, the stone masonry is still there. But yeah, I think for a long time they came up against it when it came to the planners and all that kind of stuff, JP. But maybe they had a friend on the inside. Right, Drew Mac. I don't want to start a rumour. Drew Mac, CFC. Think of the prawn sandwich, munchers and corporate we could grow. No normal fan would ever get an away ticket. By the way, you know that obviously I don't know if it was the first time the term was used, but it was Roy Keane, wasn't it, that called it the Prawn Sandwich Brigade. And since then, it's become part of football chat. You know what I mean? We just use it. It's part of the old football vernacular. You call them the Prawn Sandwich Brigade. Whenever I've been lucky enough to be in that kind of area, maybe invited by a pal or whatever, JP, what I see are working class people who have built a business. You know, there's Sparkies and there's builders. I mean,
well, John, my mate Mark, from school, his dad John Heaney, electrical, has been a sponsor of Celtic for years, since the 90s, maybe even 80s. I don't know, but I've said before, I always used to get excited because on the old digital board at Celtic Park, his logo would come up.
I can visualize that.
Orange lights in the digital board, and Heaney's dad's logo would come up, and I'd be like, I know John Heaney because he ran our football team at Polbeth as well. Just normal guy, like made normal guy done good, you know. And there's plenty of other examples I know of people that have tables in boxes and things like that, and it's not like they've not got it through crypto.
They've not been born into privilege. I think that's my point. It's not like that, and it's not like a tourist fan. It's a fan who has generally built a business. A lot of them are tradespeople that built the business up, and then at some point their accountant says to them, right, if you don't spend that on some kind of entertaining clients that it gets written off as, the tax man's going to get it. Because back in the day, Edinburgh firms would buy a table at Tynecastle and Easter Road, and there's a lot of companies done the same in Glasgow. So not to have a dig at you, but I don't think we've got as many prawn sandwich munchers as other clubs. Thomas Burns, I'm okay saying it's okay to say that we need to do it, but where does the 80 million quid come from? Well, the first thing is you don't have to come up with it in one go. You know, when you're putting money back into the infrastructure of your stadium, then it can be done over a period of time. You can actually borrow some of that money if you're a club like Celtic. But also, we do have money as well. So a massive percentage of that could actually come from within. Fran Vinegar of CityLink, best name of the day. I'd sooner participate in a Champions League final than host it.
Fair point.
That's a fair point. We've got more chance of hosting it though, haven't we? At the moment.
Let's be realistic, guy.
And then year on year, we talk about this advantage, this inbuilt advantage that Fergus McCann, and I think Jim Orr has spoken about it for years. Alan Morrison's spoken about it for years. To build a stadium at 60,000 capacity, JP, at a time when our team wasn't very good. We hadn't won much trophies in the last decade prior to Fergus McCann coming into the football club. I mean, he was a visionary. You know, to be able to say we're going to build a stadium 60,000 capacity. But as well as that, it's not that he just plucked that figure out the air. It was to have that advantage, of course, over your main challengers, Rangers, whose capacity was 50. It'd be interesting to hear what the attendance, their capacity would be if you were to build up that main stand. But let's say it was between 70 to 75. Let's say it was around about that figure. Then you're getting more of an advantage. So your financial advantage is going to grow year on year. So in effect, eventually, it's giving you a better chance of competing in Europe as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and then it would put us further ahead of another club in Glasgow, as we already are every season before a ball's kicked, which was the Fergus McCann template, and he knew exactly what he was doing at that point because he was so frugal on every aspect of things, whether it was sending photographers on flights to cover a game and then being like, no, that's not happening. We're not wasting that money. You know that he had that long-term plan in his mind, and then yeah, I mean, if it was to be another 10, 15,000 seats that you sold season tickets for on top of that, then I mean, what are we right now before a ball's kicked? Something like 2-3 million ahead ish.
Well, if you've got 10,000 seats every single week or every single season in terms of season tickets, plus the money spent by each of the individual fan in your stadium every single week, and you've got 20 home games, you've got 200,000 more bums on seats a season. 200,000. So what you're talking then, maybe 30 quid on average per ticket. So you're up at 6 million in ticket sales, and then you've got the average revenue per 200,000. So that could maybe push you up another million or two. It's astonishing figures, JP. Incredible figures. The advantage that you've got by having that extra capacity.
Absolutely, and again, as well as that, it makes a club that's appealing even more appealing, because I mean, you've listened to Matt Riley talking this week about the pressures of playing for Celtic. You know, you can't understand how intense it is until you've played up there. But then he also enjoyed the fact that he was playing in front of 60,000 fans every second week. And by the way, what a moment for him at the weekend.
Oh, I know. So happy. JP, let's have a wee moment. Let's have a Matt O'Reilly appreciation moment. We've not had one for a while.
Oh, we just play for Celtic and we'll forget about it. Move on. Okay.
No, let's appreciate the man for a moment, because, you know, Matt O'Reilly never put a foot wrong at Celtic. He never agitated for a move. We saw him improving season on season. He's gone down there. And to be honest with you, and I know there's a lot of fans out there, and I'm not telling everybody how to think about this. Once a player leaves Celtic, they're not interested. There's certain players that I do wish the best for, and O'Reilly's in there. So when he got injured, I was kind of gutted for him. I don't know him. I've never spoken to him, obviously, but I was gutted for him. Gutted for him. Yeah. And then to see him, you know, making that comeback. And what about the celebration for Matt O'Reilly? The way that he celebrated that goal, it was just so emotional. So fair play to Matt O'Reilly, and I don't mind speaking
about the stadium to life. Apparently, it really brought the stadium to life, because I don't think Brighton's atmosphere is anywhere near what Celtic Park is. And I think the Man City fans were singing something like being sort of taking the mick out of themselves by singing "Are we at the Etihad?" You know, they were singing that to the Brighton fans, basically, because of the atmosphere. And then obviously the equaliser goes in, and then Matt Riley scores the winner, and you're like, when it came on, I actually had a feeling, and I should have put my money where my mouth is, because I genuinely had a feeling the way that they were playing as well. I was like, he's just going to slot into that space, and you saw him in that space that he's been in for Celtic so many times. And as soon as he got through and goal, I was like, he's scoring this. There's absolutely no way he's not scoring this, because he's so focused, and genuinely just so happy for him that after 3 months of what will have been very tough. I know he said that it allowed him time to get to know the teammates and, you know, acclimatise to living in a different city and everything else, but it can't have been easy to be injured, having made a £25 million move to a new club, you know, before the end of the transfer window as well. They could have gone out and signed somebody short term or even to rival his position, but they had faith that they could get by, and they've got by. And what a result they got against Pep Guardiola and the champions of England. Like, I just so enjoyed seeing them sick, like Haaland, like spewing and that, and Guardiola going up to, is it Van Heck, the Dutch centre half, like giving him it tight and all that, and just Phil Foden raging. Like, Phil Foden and Matt Riley know each other obviously from the youth setup and everything, and I shook hands, but I don't think it was happy. But yeah, just a great way to announce yourself. And then the interviews with him afterwards as well on Sky when Jamie Redknapp was like, "Hi Matt, big fan, big fan of you at Celtic. Watched you for your Celtic days and all that." And he was like, "Oh, thanks very much." And maybe some people might have thought that was him being disingenuous, but I think Jamie Redknapp probably has watched Matt O'Reilly at Celtic. Maybe not every game. He's not watching Celtic home and away, but certainly in bigger games, I'm sure he's watched Matt O'Reilly and been impressed. So I think there was a willingness from quite a lot of people outside of Brighton for him to do well, just because of the type of person that he is. And then he came across so well in the interviews. And that's the exposure that he's got just from the interviews alone. Never mind the goal. The interviews is like putting him on the map as a human being, as a person. And you could see that what it meant to him, and he just speaks so well, and it was absolutely great. And I don't know if I'd have felt the same if he scored the goal against Man United. I probably would have, actually, to be honest.
Oh, you would have. The big thing with that is, Redknapp speaking respectfully about Celtic. That's all you kind of ask for as a Celtic supporter. Some people don't care either way, but unless you're one of these guys like a shock jock who likes to take a dig at Scottish football and Celtic and all this kind of stuff. I do see that there's a lot of respect in there. I mean, Gary Lineker speaks with respect about Celtic. Obviously, Peter Schmeichel has been since Casper signed for the football club. I always like it when Keane and Wright talk about Celtic in glowing terms, because, we are the first to criticise the Scottish game, JP, but no Celtic, because Celtic are a global brand.
Sutton's been in his name's in the hat to take over from Gary Lineker as Match of the Day host.
Oh,
I read an article the other day, and there's like Dion Dublin's name's in the hat as well, but Sutton's a front runner.
I think Sutton's brilliant. I really do, right? And see, the thing that I'll never forget, I will never forget this, and maybe it's name dropping, I don't know, but it happened. So I'm telling you the story. But we were doing a gig quite a few years ago. Neil Lennon was the manager of Hibs, and there was a big event on at the Glasgow Royal Concert Hall. I hosted it, and it was Chris Sutton and Neil Lennon, right? And the way that the night ran, for anybody who was out there, it was a great night, brilliant. Neil Lennon came on second, so we had Chris Sutton for maybe 40 minutes, Neil Lennon for about 40 minutes, and then the two of them came on to answer questions from the audience, right? So we were standing at the side of the stage, and Sutton and Lennon had been in the dressing room area, and there's me in the dressing room with they two, think to themselves, I'm an imposter, right? And it was a really strange situation. There was a piano in the corner, JP, and I'm just sitting, leaning against this piano, and they two guys are having crack as if it was a proper football dressing room. And I'm just watching my time until we go on. So I said to Chris, right, it's time for us to go up. We're standing side of the stage, and we're waiting on me to get called on the stage so I can introduce Chris. And I turned round, and he was ashen-faced, as if he was like really, really nervous, bricking it, which I think the reason I wasn't is because I'm just worried about what I'm going to say, what my first question is. I'm just concentrating and focusing on what I'm going to do, right? And I said to him, I was like, "You're right." He goes, "Oh, I get really, really nervous with these things." And I said to him, I was like, "But you played in the UEFA Cup final. You've played against Rangers in front of 60,000 Celtic fans." He goes, "I know, but I was good at that." And at that point, I got introduced and I went on the stage, and this was ringing in my mind. I thought to myself, that's Chris Sutton. Nervous. This is bizarre. So I introduced him on the stage. I asked him one question, and the first thing he done is turned into the Chris Sutton you see on the TV. It was almost like a caricature, transformative, in front of my eyes, and he starts ripping me to shreds on the stage in front of 1,500 people who are all laughing at me, by the way. Brilliant. Great experience. But it stuck with me because I thought to myself, Chris Sutton, how can you get nerves? So he is human. And then forward a few years later, we were in Edinburgh doing something a lot smaller, and we had a chance before the doors opened to sit and have a coffee and that. And he was like, "Oh, I couldn't do what you do. I couldn't do the hosting side of things." Fast forward, and he's been doing it for Celtic. He's done it on big stages, and now he's been spoken about. I think he would be brilliant at that. I really do.
Yeah, it would be. I would be interested if he's got to have Shearer as his co-host, or one of the pundits. Because
would they play on that, the SAS thing? Remember that?
I mean, I don't know. For some reason in my head, I think that they don't get on. I mean, is that a thing? Has that ever been mentioned, or been made public? I don't know. that's just what I have in my head, whether I've read it or heard it somewhere at some point over the years. Because whenever Sutton's asked about the best player or striker that he played with, he always says Henrik Larsson. And he doesn't just say it at Celtic events. He says it at other events as well, like non-Celtic related events. He'll not just pick a player to suit each situation or occasion. But I would be intrigued to see what he would be like as the host of Match of the Day. We better talk about Casper Schmeichel before this runs out, because
we absolutely better. By the way, though, if he does that, then he would be kind of less and less gettable in terms of bringing him up for live events, because he would be just busy as anything. P. McLaughlin, a couple of comments, then we will indeed talk about Casper Schmeichel. Apparently, there would be 53,000 available seats if the main stand was shut off, because I think, does it hold 6,000 or 8,000? So if that was the case, with a 2% drop off every season, you probably would get away without moving anybody out of the stadium. They would just be relocated in the stadium, and no away fans would be allowed. That's not a bad thing. P. McLaughlin again, most of the South Stand book holders would be able to be relocated. There is no listed building at Celtic Park, says Barca Boy. That's something that comes up a lot. And I thought the front, says Andy, the front bit was listed. If not, wire in, he says. Rebuilding the South Stand, not on the agenda and won't happen anytime soon, says Parkhead Boy. Is that Eminem in the avatar? I think it is. Eminem. Right, we will talk about Schmeichel, but before we do that, JP, today is the anniversary of the passing of the one, the only, Bertie Auld. And, you know, people go on about the greatest ever Celt, right? And this is a big thing, because I think the most entertaining Celt is undoubtedly Jimmy Johnston, right? The greatest ever captain was Billy McNeil. You know, we had this discussion about the Patriot game TIFO, didn't we? About the top 5, top 6 Celts and all this stuff. The biggest personality, I think, is Bertie Auld. 3 years gone today. That's incredible, isn't it?
It's like terrifying that it doesn't feel like that long ago at all. But yeah, I was lucky enough to meet him a couple of times and just had very brief crack with him, and he was great. You know, he was just an absolute character, and it's kind of weird when you're talking to him and you're thinking this kind of jokey guy was at the forefront of Celtic's biggest ever success in Europe. And yeah, when I went to Lisbon, I sang the Celtic song Down the Tunnel in homage to him. That was 2018 when I was there. And incidentally, my friend's girlfriend Lisa went to the stadium recently and found the seat that her granddad sat in at Lisbon.
I love that.
And got a picture taken sitting in the seat. It's brilliant. What an amazing thing to actually, like, one, visit the ground, and two, know that your granddad had been there on that day, and then actually find the seat, because it's the exact same. It's not changed. I keep hearing these stories about them renovating it or doing things to it, and you don't want that to change at all. You want it to stay the same for future generations of Celtic fans to be able to go back and sort of soak in that sunshine standing in that ground for what those guys did. You know,
it's a time capsule. You want it to be a time capsule, don't you? I mean, yeah, unbelievable that all these years later, you know, Celtic fans, I don't know if it's a daily occurrence, but obviously the guy at the stadium knows.
I'd be surprised if it was, by the way.
I know. Yeah, and the guy at the stadium knows that to expect Celtic fans. And I shared a wee video today on the socials. It was sent to me by Neely Mockin Jr., who was with Bertie and some of the other Lions back in 2017. And they walked up the tunnel, and who's singing the song? Bertie. That's beautiful. It's like hairs in the back of the neck stuff, JP. Fast forward to 2024, we have a goalkeeper here who's taken over from a fan's favourite in Joe Hart, and who, at the time, JP, and people like to forget this, a lot of Celtic fans were writing off. Was it an age thing? Was it the fact that it was the end of his career? He was out to grass. Was it the fact that we were being linked to other big money signings for a goalkeeper, and we ended up with Schmeichel after a phone call from Brendan Rodgers? But to be fair, going right back to that point, I don't think we ever wrote him off. I think our discussions were always in the positive.
No, and when I saw the tagline, when I brought this screen up because obviously, despite what people think, we don't have scripts. There's no
agenda.
No agenda fed to us by Celtic or anybody else.
You never know what you're going to be talking about when you come on here. You just know it's 1 hour talking about Celtic. That's it.
Yeah, no. But I vividly remember having a bit of a tete-a-tete with someone. I'm not going to name them, but I'm going to shame them. Because I went back to like a bulletin that we did in August because I wanted to look at the comments, and someone had wrote, I would not trust Casper because Leicester City got rid of him a few years ago. Nice got rid of him 2 years ago. Anderlecht gave him a free transfer. That's 3 clubs that have offloaded this so-called world-class goalkeeper in Casper. Laughing emoji. We need a goalkeeper that can keep the ball out of the net. Laughing emoji. And then someone replied and said, so basically you're looking for the Croatian number 1. And I said, yeah. Celtic supporters all over the world wanted Croatia's number 1. Also, a Celtic State of Mind team. No Celtic supporter wanted a 37 going on 38-year-old Kasper Schmeichel. Casper 10 years ago would have been a great sign for the club, not now. And then this guy's replied and said, well, to be fair, Patrick, and based purely on what I and everyone else have seen so far, I reckon he'll do a good job for us for the season ahead. Of course, after that, you're still back to square one looking for a new keeper. Maybe the Croatian number 1 will be available. And then it was, we should have signed a top quality goalkeeper 2 years ago. As Paul from a Celtic State of Mind said, Celtic are too scared to spend £8 million on a player because of our wage structure. I don't think I recall you saying that, but only time will tell if Casper will cut it at Celtic. At least Celtic will pay him a good pension.
How wrong you were. How wrong you were. Now,
but there's people that are just like, I get slagged for my positivity. I've been slagged by fellow Celtic fan media, who I happen to call friends, for being overly positive about Celtic players, whilst other people might be, quick to throw them on the scrap heap, i.e. Liam Scales. Mm-hmm. But I've always been of the opinion that until someone has proved to me over a period of time that they're not worth a Celtic jersey, and there's a couple that I could name in the Celtic squad right now that applies to, I'm not going to just write somebody off. Casper Schmeichel had barely kicked a ball for us in August. All we'd seen of him was in the pre-season friendlies. As if I was going to sit here and be like, oh, I can't believe we signed Schmeichel. We should have signed that Croatian guy. We've not signed a Croatian guy. This is going to be a disaster. I'm pretty sure the same person that was having a go at that was saying that it was a terrible mistake and it was going to impact us in Europe and everything else. Kasper Schmeichel's been brilliant for us in Europe. I mean, yeah, you could point to the Borussia Dortmund game and say, oh, well, what about that? But I don't think he was at fault for really any of those goals.
He made some big saves.
There are mistakes. They were as a result of mistakes that were made by outfield players that led us into positions where Kasper Schmeichel's not saving that Adeyemi shot that goes into the top bin. As much as people might still argue that he should have, I don't know how he's saving that. He comes out to go for the ball at the penalty. He's in a hide into nothing. He has to come out, and the guy gets the penalty. And then you look at the others as well. They're just Maeda's misplaced pass that leads to that next goal just before half time, and it was just a horrible night. I don't blame Kasper Schmeichel for that. And you look at him on Sunday, makes a couple of really big saves at crucial points.
Yeah,
same as the Leipzig game. He's just someone that you have a confidence in, and I wasn't really aware of how good his distribution is, but you see the difference. And no disrespect to Joe Hart, but you see the difference in the way that I don't know what it is. It's not a Cruyff turn, but what the wee turn that he did in the box. I mean, that's gallus to say the least. But he's got that ability to just, when he's got the ball and he's got an open pitch and he's got centre halves who are maybe being pressed by the strikers or whatever, he's got the ability to look all around the pitch and go, I'm going to pass to him. And he makes the pass, and he invariably gets the pass right. Even if it's clearing over a centre half and it's going out to Alistair Johnson, who's further right, or sometimes he'll even nail somebody like Hatate in the midfield because he trusts Hatate's touch, because Hatate has got a great touch. So if you play a ball over the top with a bit of pace in it, I mean, sometimes he puts a bit too much pace on the ball. I mean, that one for Bernardo where he rattled it from close. You're like, come on, man, give the guy a chance. But I everything all round personality, great, consistency, great, reliability, great. Chat of a new contract, would not balk at that. Like, there's chat there about like, oh well, you know, we're back to square one. Maybe we're not back to square one. Maybe we could get 2 seasons out of Casper Schmeichel.
Yeah, I mean, probably through his dad, he's spoken about playing until he's 40. You know, so you look at, and I'm not saying, you know, he would get a game for us, but Craig Gordon right now is in his early 40s. Goalies can play up to that point. I mean, Casper Schmeichel right now, it's not as if he looks as though he's the leanest he's ever been in his career, right? But it's not affecting him, JP. So I reckon he can get up to the age of 40, 41 and still produce and provide. Now, going back to the original point, and the commenter made this point, and I know that you'll need to get off, JP, because we've ran late as we do. Dominik Livakovic was the goalkeeper in question, wasn't he? Yes. He was the Croatian number 1. So let's have a look at his season so far. Now, bear in mind, he is playing for Fenerbahce, and he has played 19 games. Casper Schmeichel has played 18 for Celtic, so we can kind of compare and contrast. Goals conceded, Livakovic 22, Casper Schmeichel 15, and that includes 7 against Dortmund, by the way. Clean sheets, Livakovic 7, Schmeichel 11. So I think we've done all right. I think we've done.
And also, the other thing we were talking about when we were talking about bringing a new keeper in, we were saying that we needed it was such a crucial position to fill at that time. We needed a big personality. A big personality had left the building in Joe Hart. The guy's now all over media. So clearly he's got patter, and no doubt, as you can see from the documentary from last season, that he was big in the changing room. So that was going out the door. So not only did you need a keeper that was good, but you needed someone who had presence and had influence. And a young up-and-coming keeper, no matter how much he costs, may not have had that. No. There's no guarantee that Croatian number 1 would have come in and been the same success and inspired the same confidence as Casper Schmeichel has. And that was the reason at the time that I was very optimistic about him, because one, it was Brendan Rodgers that had wanted to bring him in, and I'm completely on board with anything that Brendan Rodgers wants, he should get. I mean, let's face facts. As somebody else pointed out, would other previous managers have been allowed to spend the thick end of 30 million on players this summer? Probably not. But you're in a situation whereby you've got Brendan Rodgers, then you need to deliver what Brendan Rodgers wants. Otherwise, you've got a very angry fan base, and you've got people pointing the finger at Peter Lawwell again, going, oh, he must need his driveway done again or something like that. And you're just like, oh, but aye. So that's the reality. And Schmeichel was his man. He made the call. Yes, it seems a little bit slapdash in terms of the scouting. And you're like, well, really? That's all it took was a phone call or a text from Brendan Rodgers to be like, oh, well, I'll just get Casper Schmeichel. Never mind all this scouting up-and-coming keepers. I was like, I've got a guy, he's a free agent. We won't need to pay a fee for him. Well, obviously need to give him a decent wage, and I'm sure he's on a decent wage, but I don't know how you could argue that he's not the signing of the summer, given his influence.
He's my signing of the summer so far. And I think, you see the Aston Villa game, that who knows what the situation might be at that point, but there's going to be points of that game, JP, where you need that leadership you're talking about. You know, Joe Hart had it last season, he absolutely did. But that leadership that Schmeichel has, and if you had brought someone in who was maybe 23, 24, big fee, still up and coming, still learning the trade to a degree, would you have still had that presence? I'm not so sure.
And also the recovery from Dortmund as well was important. Yeah. Like he said, I'll chew on this until midnight, and then after that, it's a new dawn, it's a new day. I'm ready to go for the next game. And that, to the younger players who haven't maybe gone through that, that will have been massive for them, I would have thought.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let us know in the comments section who has been your signing of the summer. Thanks everybody for getting involved today. It's been 1 hour and 10 minutes of Celtic chat. I don't even think we veered into music chat, although there's plenty going on, JP. We could be talking about that as well. Fergus was indeed a visionary, says Uncle Nobby Steamboat. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Come and see us live. Get involved in one of the live events. We've got John Collins coming up. There's tickets underneath in the link, and we've got the Centenary Boys coming up a wee bit later in December. Why not make it a Christmas night out? Ticket link under the video. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you to John Paul Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.